Chapter 1. The Haunted Cabin. It was a clear, moonless night in the woods. A group of 5 friends decided to go camping for the weekend and explore the wilderness. They had all grown up together, and this was a much-needed reunion for them. As they hiked through the dense forest, they stumbled upon an old, dilapidated cabin. The wooden structure was shrouded in vines and seemed to be untouched for decades. The group was curious, and they decided to investigate. Upon entering the cabin, they were greeted with the musty smell of decay and the sound of creaking floorboards. The cabin was empty, and there were no signs of anyone having lived there recently. As they settled in for the night, strange occurrences began to happen. The fire they had started seemed to flicker with a life of its own, and the shadows danced around the cabin. A faint whispering could be heard, but they couldn't pinpoint where it was coming from. Soon, they discovered that the cabin was haunted by the spirit of a woodsman who had died there many years ago. The spirit was vengeful and angry, and it was determined to take revenge on anyone who dared to disturb its resting place. The friends tried to leave, but the spirit was too powerful, and they were trapped inside the cabin. It wasn't until they found an old journal belonging to the woodsman that they were able to uncover the truth and put the spirit to rest. As they left the cabin, the friends couldn't help but wonder what other spirits and horrors lurked in the woods, waiting to be discovered. Chapter 2. The Lake Monster. The Smith family was excited to go on their annual camping trip. They had chosen a beautiful spot by the lake, surrounded by towering trees and picturesque views. They set up camp, started a fire, and settled in for the night. But as soon as the sun set, strange things began to happen. The water in the lake started to stir, and the trees rustled as if something was moving through them. The family started to feel uneasy, but they brushed it off as their imagination. But then they saw it. A massive creature emerged from the water, with scales as black as night and razor-sharp teeth. It had red, glowing eyes and an aura of menace that made the family freeze in terror. The creature attacked, and the family barely escaped with their lives. They spent the rest of the night huddled together in their tent, listening to the creature circle their campsite. The next day, the family tried to leave, but the creature was relentless. It followed them through the woods, always lurking just out of sight. They soon realized that they were dealing with a monster that was beyond their understanding. It wasn't until they stumbled upon an old journal belonging to a local historian that they learned the truth. The lake was cursed, and the creature was a manifestation of that curse. It was said that anyone who disturbed the waters would suffer the wrath of the monster. The family had no choice but to fight back. They gathered all the weapons they could find and prepared for a final showdown. It was a fierce battle, but in the end, they emerged victorious, and the monster was defeated. The family packed up their things and left, but they couldn't shake the feeling that the curse of the lake would follow them wherever they went. Chapter 3. The Possessed Camper. Jake had always loved camping alone. He enjoyed the peace and solitude of the wilderness and felt a connection to nature that he couldn't find anywhere else. He set up his tent deep in the woods, far away from civilization, and prepared for a few days of solitude. But something was different this time. The moment he set foot in the woods, he felt an eerie presence surrounding him. The trees seemed to be watching him, and the animals were unusually quiet. Jake tried to ignore it, but it only got worse. One night, he discovered an ancient artifact buried in the ground. It was a small, carved figurine, and it emanated a strange energy that made Jake feel uneasy. He decided to keep it, thinking it would make a good souvenir. But as soon as he touched the artifact, strange things began to happen. His behavior became erratic, and he started to hear voices in his head. The animals around him became agitated, and the trees started to shake. Jake soon realized that he was possessed by a powerful spirit, and it was using him to exact revenge on those who had disturbed the woods. He fought against it, but it was too strong. He was trapped in his own mind, a prisoner to the vengeful spirit. It wasn't until he met a wise old shaman that he learned the truth. The artifact he had found was cursed, and it had been used by ancient tribes to trap powerful spirits. The shaman helped Jake to break the curse and release the spirit, but not before they engaged in a fierce battle of wills. In the end, Jake was free, but he was forever changed by his experience. He left the woods, knowing that he could never return, but he also knew that he had learned a valuable lesson. The wilderness was not a place to be taken lightly, and the spirits that dwelled within it were powerful beyond measure. Chapter 4. The Ghostly Hitchhiker. Tom was driving back home from a camping trip when he saw her. A young woman, dressed in a white dress, was standing by the side of the road, her thumb outstretched, looking for a ride. Tom slowed down and asked if she needed a lift. The woman got in the car, and Tom started to drive. They made small talk, but the woman seemed distant, lost in thought. Tom thought it was strange, but he didn't want to pry. As they drove on, the woman suddenly disappeared, leaving only a chill in the air. Tom was confused but decided to brush it off as his imagination. But then he saw her again. The same woman, standing by the side of the road, looking for a ride. He picked her up, and they continued their journey. But as they drove, strange things started to happen. The radio would turn on and off, and the car would shake as if something was trying to push it off the road. The woman remained silent, but her presence filled the car with an eerie energy. It wasn't until Tom reached a nearby town that he learned the truth. The woman he had picked up was a ghost, a hitchhiking spirit that haunted the road, looking for someone to take her home. She had died years ago in a car accident, and her spirit was trapped in a loop, forever reliving her last moments. Tom knew he had to help her. He researched the accident and learned the details of her death. He went back to the spot where he had picked her up and called out her name. The woman appeared, and Tom helped her to move on to the afterlife. As Tom drove away, he couldn't shake the feeling that the woman had found peace, and that he had helped to right a wrong that had haunted the road for years. Chapter 5. The Cursed Forest. The cursed forest had always been a place of legends and myths. People had reported strange sightings, unusual noises, and unexplained disappearances for centuries. But for Emily and her friends, it was just another camping trip. They set up their tents and started to explore the woods, looking for adventure. But as they delved deeper into the forest, they began to feel uneasy. The trees seemed to close in around them, and the animals were unusually quiet. Emily's friend, Sarah, suggested they turn back, but Emily was determined to press on. That night, as they sat around the campfire, they heard a blood-curdling scream. They rushed to investigate and found nothing but an abandoned cabin. The cabin was old and dilapidated, but it seemed to be calling out to them. Emily felt a strange urge to enter, and her friends followed. As soon as they stepped inside, they knew they had made a mistake. The air was thick with an oppressive energy, and the walls seemed to be closing in around them. They tried to leave, but the door was locked. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped. The night was long and terrifying. They heard strange whispers and footsteps, and things moved on their own. Emily's friend, Alex, suggested they try to find a way out, and they started to search the cabin for clues. As they searched, they discovered an old journal. It belonged to a man who had lived in the cabin over a century ago. The man had been cursed by a powerful spirit that had haunted the forest for generations. The spirit had claimed his family, and he had been forced to live alone, in isolation, for the rest of his life. Emily knew they had to break the curse. She convinced her friends to perform a ritual she had read about, hoping it would be enough to appease the spirit. The ritual was dangerous, and they risked angering the spirit even more, but they had no other choice. As they performed the ritual, the cabin shook, and the air crackled with energy. But then, suddenly, it was over. The door unlocked, and they were free. As they stumbled out of the cabin, they saw the trees around them change. They no longer seemed threatening, and the animals returned, as if nothing had happened. Emily and her friends knew they had done something important, something that would change the cursed forest forever. They left the woods, forever changed by their experience. They knew they had faced a powerful spirit, but they had also learned that they were capable of facing their fears and breaking curses. The cursed forest would always be a place of legends, but Emily and her friends would always know the truth behind the myths.